Good evening, everyone. Adipa and Sahanya. Can you hear me? And I wish that you are able to see me as well. Thank you. Okay, great. Now, thanks that you all are responding via the chat, but I allow if you all can respond with your microphone as well, because we have now come into the 11th session, which means we are now done with 1/4 of the entire program. So we quite simply mastered lots of things, starting from where all this journey should begin with finding different scientific and technical and academic sort of literature is available. We started with, if you could remember, the Google Scholar profile and how to search for authentic data and literature from online. And then we came into reading strategies, listening strategies, and of course, then we moved on to summarizing, paraphrasing. Those are simply the reading strategies. And of course, writing strategies. And then with an overview of grammar and with bit of writing or rather bit of complexity of writing from simple to complicated, we have evolved or rather explored through different writing styles and levels as well. Today, with that knowledge in our hand, we are going to really apply the knowledge that we've gained so far in a real life exercise relevant to STEM, right? So, what is our discussion today will be based on how, in a simple graphical representation, we start general literacy programs in schools with picture descriptions. But when it comes to academic discourses, it's not pictures. Actually, they are going to be illustrations, they are going to be graphs, they are going to be charts, and lots of other modalities and data coming into graphical illustrations in STEM literature. So today we are going to look at a strategy as to how graphs could be described. And of course, we'll be trying out to understand the language used for that. So are you guys, if you are aware what you're going to learn today, quickly send me in a response what today's session is all about. I just gave a brief outline what we're going to do. Now you can tell me what today is all about so that you'll be communicating with me that you are in the lecture with me, knowing what's happening here. So be quick to send me the aspect that we are discussing today. Thank you, Adiba. Yes. So it's going to be graphical language or the language that we use to describe graphs, bar charts, and all that. Okay. Now, a simple question. Send me 3 different types of graphs that you are already known to. I'm sure that in your advanced levels and in your other programs following after the advanced level, you come to know about some data presentation diagrams or other pictorial presentation of data. And here I am inviting you to name 3 types of charts that you are already known to. Quickly send me your response. 3 types of charts. Okay, thank you, Sahanya. And can I hear from Adipa? Thank you. So it's all about charts, graphs, and illustrations that we are going to discuss today. So let me share my screen with you so that you'll be able to see today's slides. Yes. Hope you can see my slides on your screen. Is it the case? Yes, it is. Okay. So we'll begin with line graphs because that's the simplest form of graphs. And today, with bit of exercises and with bit of practical work in the classroom, what you're going to do is to master how to describe a line graph. Okay, just one single question to begin with. Okay, let's move on slides and see what are there. So when you are dealing with data, information, and particularly STEM is all about data and language and of course knowledge crafted upon collecting data, analyzing them, and interpreting them. So this particular domain, even now it has gone beyond STEM fields. It's now coming into other fields like social sciences and other humanities fields as well. There isn't any research happening in any of these fields without data involved in. So let us see why and where line graphs could be useful. What the slides say? Yeah. They, in STEM fields, are frequently used in these three distinct purposes. They are used for these purposes. What are they? They are used to show trends over time. Now, line basically indicates a movement of a something happening, motion of a something happening over time. So if something changes across weeks, months, days, years, and maybe decades and so on, so we can easily indicate that in a line graph. So trends over time are basically something that we express or rather that we illustrate with line graphs. What else? And if you really want to compare different variables or categories, then again, line graphs are going to be useful, right? And in this particular graph chart category, you'll see that, it's about changing from one place to another, changing from one time to another, and growth, decline. And when you talk about change involves growing, declining, and maybe settling. So there can be different graph types which are dealing with these things. Well, quite simply, line graphs are actually ideal, great for analyzing continuous data. Particularly continuous in the sense if something happens over time, they are continuous data. And if you want to see any pattern in this data changing over time, line graphs are going to be a wonderful solution for that. So we are going to look at how we as STEM graduates going to manage or rather going to use master language to describe line graphs. So to begin with, what a line graph indicates, we need to know what a line graph includes. As you all know, it has vertical and horizontal axis. We call them X and Y axis, right? So these axes are to indicate some variables, right? In those axes, we indicate variables, yes. Usually x-axis is in line graphs are used usually for the sequence or the time that is changing over the course of the experiment. And y-axis is actually to the time is also a variable, but against time, if you are observing something on the other end, we simply take it to the y-axis. Say, for example, how temperature varies over months. What is the temperature in January, February, so on. So we usually take in x-axis the months, January, February, and so on. And in y-axis, we simply take the temperature, starting from 0 or somewhere to rise up in given contour, given scales. Okay. And then there are data points, between X and Y coordinates. You are very much familiar about graphs because it's something part and parcel of your O-level mathematics and advanced level mathematics. And now coming into STEM fields, once again, in between, when X and Y coordinates, we call them points, data points, right? And they actually represent values at given moment. Well, then what lines are? Lines are basically when you identify values at given intervals, and when then values are connected, when the dots are connected, then comes the line. That's how the things happen. And in any graph, it is a must for you to have a title because title indicates what sort of what data is this graph bringing in. And that usually appears on top of the table. And in the bottom of the table, we see legends. Legends are basically guides or rather indexes or indices that represent, the shape of uh, the very pattern that we use to indicate a particular line, maybe what X and Y axis indicates, maybe other variables. If there are symbolically used legends or others, if there are symbols used in the text graph, those are indicated in the legend below in the uh, line graph. So let's look at a real time line graph, right? Okay. Now to see whether you are with me, I'm going to ask a simple question, right? I haven't shown you the graph, what it is, right? But I'm going to tell what it is in words, and you have to tell me what in this particular description, what will you be using as the variable that you use in x-axis and the variable that you might take into y-axis, right? So you have to just indicate in this scenario, which I am going to describe right now, what variables you will be using in x and y axis. Okay. Question is this. Yeah. It's about the popularity. It's about the popularity of a particular celebrity, which goes up and down over months or other years. So imagine it's the popularity of Shah Rukh Khan during the last 15 years. You see, what are the variables in this particular graph that you think will be, and in which axis you'll be using which variable? Quickly respond me on the chat. So what we are going to describe in the graph is popularity of Shah Rukh Khan over the months. So popularity is indicated, the fan base, right? How many fans were actively engaged in, let me say, Shah Rukh Khan's social media profile? In January, average how many? In February, average how many? And so on. Well, or rather, it was all 15 years, yes. In 2001 to 2010 to 2025. That was the time that we consider in this thing. How the fan base of Shah Rukh Khan changed over time. What will you be using in x-axis? What will you be using in y-axis? That's my question is. Friends, I wish you can send your answers. What we'll be using in y-axis and what is to be used in x-axis. You know the scenario. Well, Sahanya tells X months and years popularity. Okay. X time. Okay. Y popularity. Fans in social media. Oh, it's okay. Perfect. Perfect. You have an understanding what we are discussing. Okay, great. We'll go ahead. Now, in this particular graph chart, graph category, there are certain things which are really, really relevant when it comes to vocabulary. Now, you see, I have given here some vocabulary which are going to be key in describing line graphs, right? Because in a line graph, there are certain movements. They are increasing. Increasing is simply growing up from one particular time to another. When time moves, if something is growing, we call it increase. And the same thing is indicated with some other words like increase, rise, climb, surge, and so on. Keep this vocabulary as part of your STEM journey because these words are really, really significant for you to describe line graphs. And it's about increasing. And if you're talking about a decreasing trend or rather declining or falling trend, then you can use these words like drop, decline, fall, or plummet. Hmm? And the very nature of this increase or decrease can be indicated by using these adjectives, right? Whether it's a steady increase, whether it's a steady climb, whether it's a steady rise, or whether it's a steady drop, you see? Steady, gradual, sharp, and dramatic are some of the adjectives that you can use to describe the very nature of this fluctuation, either increasing or decreasing, right? And if something moves, if something, other than growing and falling, if it is fluctuating or rather if it is more and more dynamic, we can use words like fluctuate. If it goes up and down, we call it fluctuates. And if it comes to some peak, high, and top level, we call it level off. And if it reaches the top of any point, we call it peak, right? And then if something was growing up and then falling and then once again if it goes upward, we call it recovering or rather gaining the momentum which was once there but later dropped. That is recovery. So I'm just describing the key vocabulary that you can use in a line graph. And by using all these words, I'm inviting you to take a little snapshot of this slide. You can take a screenshot or rather a snipping of the screen so that you can refer to this vocabulary later when you're going to do the exercises. Okay. So these lines actually tell certain information, and some of the information it tells include certain trends, maybe upward trends, downward trends, maybe it's about growth, decrease, and these are key vocabulary that you're going to use in a line graph. Well, before I move on to the next slide, I'm going to ask one question. I moved on to the next slide, but I'm going to ask one question from the key vocabulary. Quickly take your time to find the definition on this very word and tell me what is the meaning of it, or rather, I want you to tell it by unmuting your microphone. Yes. Find the meaning or the definition of plummet. Plummet. And tell me what is it. So we are looking at this very word's meaning. Find the meaning and tell me. Time to time, I set such a question to ensure that you and me are connected unless uh, you'll feel yourself alone, and I also feel myself alone speaking to a screen, right? Don't let it happen. And I am inviting you to speak now because we want to come to speak as well. It's not always about listening and writing, but we should practice our speaking skills as well. So you must be searching the meaning of plummet. And I want to hear from Adipa first and then Sahanya. I want to hear, I told I want to hear, not to read it. When you're ready, unmute your mic and tell us.
Fall or drop.
Okay. Thank you, Adipa. You found it's falling or dropping. Sahanya, do you like the same sentence, same word, or shall I give another one? Sahanya, will you try the meaning of this word, dramatic? Dramatic. I want the meaning from you, from Sahanya. What's the meaning of the word dramatic? It's an adjective and it is used to describe a growth or a decrease or any sort of movement. And what do we call a dramatic fall or dramatic rise? Sahana, it's over to you.
Miko, unexpected change.
Well, dramatic, sudden, unexpected. Yeah, okay, great. Let's move on to the next slide and see what we are going to do right now. Yes, here we are. Now, this is about, when it comes to STEM, STEM writings have a particular pattern, order, or rather a blueprint or a template. Always, most of the things like, starting from lab reports, starting from a graph, line graph or bar graph description, from a thesis, from a journal article or anything, all of them have particular templates. And when you know how these things are put in templates, it's quite easy for you to understand the trends and moves in it. So with that, it will make your life easy to describe, right? Okay. Now, in any description, you have to structure your description of the graph using these uh, four numbered points. First thing is, you start with an overview. Overview in the sense you are giving a very general overview, quite simply starting with what the particular graph is going to show, right? And then you come into details. In the details section, what you're doing is you start to mention specific, very highlightable, very, what we call very clearly observable points. And then you go on to describe the rest, peaks and dips. And then after describing these details, then we understand something called a trend. A trend is not something that you can see through the lines, but it is seen through the patterns of lines, right? So its third level is actually the third part of this description is not only about language, it's not also about how well you read the information in the graph, but it is about how well you can put things in and conceptualize, or rather understand an overarching trend or rather overarching pattern of the data distributed in the graph. So that is a must in your description of a graph because you should be able to understand the trends. Only if you are capable of understanding trends, then the graph description is going to be really significant because that is what we call the reading and inferencing that a graph can what we actually produce with data. And finally, we move on to a conclusion where simply we summarize insights and significance and finish it. So keep in mind, these four steps should be followed when you are drawing a description of a line graph or any of the graphs. So can you remember? The first point is overview. It is simply about the general outline of overview of what the graph shows. And then we move on to details, right? Starting from specific points, peaks, dips, and so on. And then we identify the patterns and tell what trends included in, and then we come into a conclusion. So that is typically the order of a graph description. So we are now going to look at a real graph, right? So before we move on to the real graph, I'm inviting you to take a screenshot or rather take a note on these four items: overview, details, trends, and conclusion, because when you deal with the next graph, you're going to take one sentence or a couple of sentences for each of these steps. How do you describe the overview? How do you bring the details in? How do you identify trends? And what is your conclusion? So those are the four elements. I wish you had taken a note on it. And now we are moving on to see the graph. Okay, okay. Take about 5 minutes and write your first graph description in the Acalystem class. Take about 5 minutes, and your graph I want to see, your graph description I want to see posted on chat. And not only posted, upon finishing your posting, I want each of you to read it out loud as well, because we are now beginning to speak as well. Okay, time counts. 5 minutes from now, you are describing this graph, writing it, and then presenting it.
This graph represents the trends of student enrollment from 2019 to 2023.
Mhm.
X-axis shows the years while y-axis shows the number of students. The student enrollments increased gradually from the beginning and has reached the maximum in 2023, which is 500. Also, no decreases have been observed during the specified period. According to the provided line chart, we can clearly see that students' enrollments have never decreased within the given time period. So it indicates a growing willingness among the students for the above course.
Thank you, Sahanya. I'll give a comment once Adipa has also done his part, right? Adipa, it's all to you.
This graph interprets the number of student enrollments throughout the years of 2019 to 2023. In 2019, student enrollment was below 180, but it has increased since. In the beginning of 2020, students were enrolled. Then till 2021, there is a slight rise of 20 enrolled students, and from 2021 to 2023, graph shows a steady climb.
Great. Thank you, Adip and Sahanya. Now, if I am to ask from Adip, how do you feel when Sahanya described the graph using a phrase like, the given graph describes, the given graph gives data. And why didn't you use that phrase and instead why you use the phrase this graph shows? Do you have any answer for this? Adiba?
So I was describing the graph as I made the graph and I am describing it myself, and didn't thought that the graph was given and I'm describing someone else's graph.
Perfect. Sahanya, shall I ask from you what made you choose that phrase? The given graph describes and so on. Is there any reason why you used so?
Because I'm not the one who drew the graph and it was provided me, so I thought that it was given to me.
Right. So you just take it as an assignment given by someone, so you describe it, right? Okay. Okay. Now let me ask from both Sahanya and Adib, which which phrase is more suitable? Is it the given graph describes the or this graph describes? What is the best form? Sahana, do you still think that Adipa used the right way of describing it? Or Adipa, do you still believe that your way of describing it is the most appropriate? Can I hear from Sahanya first?
I feel like both would be okay, but not sure about.
Okay, Sahanya. Adipa, how do you think?
So I think if this was a graph that I had to make for an assignment, and if I had to describe it myself, so uh, this is the right way. But
Well,
if it was an assignment to describe the graph, uh, then it would be the other one.
okay, now that's why I wanted to take this question. Thank you for the inputs that you brought in. To tell you all frankly, whether you have made the graph, developed the graph, or whether it's a given graph or whatever, remember that in graph description, you don't mind who created the graph, right? You are given a graph and you are describing it. So to make it live, the best way to do it is what Adip did. This graph shows. And if you go ahead, you can say the graph data shows. And then you might say the rise between 2019 to 2021 was fluctuating. You see? Now you are describing a graph at the given moment. So take it as this graph, the graph, and so on. You don't need to refer it as the given graph or graph by UNESCO or whatever it is, right? Okay, you two have made a great attempt, and let us move to the next exercise. Now, you have your own description written, and now here I am giving a model description. Compare your description with the model description and tell me, how do you feel? Do you feel like that you did a good job, or rather do you feel like that the model answer gives a better job? Just do a self-evaluation. First read the model description and then you can go on evaluating yourself. I'm sure you had enough time to study it. Now can you tell me, uh, okay, you don't need to tell anything. You just give marks out of 10 to your description by looking at the model description. It doesn't mean that I'm telling that the model description is perfect. You can give a mark to your description first, and then you can give a mark to model description next out of 10. Adipa, how much will you give for your answer?
It will be like 5 or 6 out of 10. And the model description, if the model description was a 10,
Okay. What about Sahanya? What about your own evaluation on your own description, and what is your evaluation on the model?
If the model answer is 10, my one would be 5.
Okay, great. Now, what made the gap between your mark and the model answers mark? So let's discuss. You see, it's very precise and straightforward. We identify what the graph is, and then we give an overview. Can you remember the first part? It is an overview. The line graph presents the trend in student enrollment from 2019 to 2023. Quite simple, straightforward, okay? Then if you could remember, what is the next item we are supposed to do? I'm going back in the slides to get back to the 4 items. Then we are coming into details. Okay, what details are there? See, in 2019, around 350 students enrolled, and the number gradually increased each year, reaching 500 in 2023. Don't you see that this description is actually a summary of the whole thing, whole line? Don't you see? Started from 350 and it rose up to 500 and it was a gradual increase. You see, it's a general picture. Okay, now coming to the third line, there is a steady upward trend throughout the period with minor fluctuations. It's a steady upward trend, true. You notice that the trend is upward. Now, I told you we are identifying trends. Yeah, it's an upward trend. And it's a significant growth. Yes, indeed. But there are fluctuations. If you have seen that 2019 to 2023, there was a bit of a fluctuation, but then it rose, or rather it rose gradually. Okay. See the fourth line. The most significant growth occurred between 2021 to 2023. Is it? It must be. Yeah, 2021 to 2023 years. Okay. Now we are coming to the bigger picture of the description. What is it? The pattern suggests growing interest in the program. Now this must be about a program. You make, students enroll in programs, right? So you make your own assumptions based on the data given. This pattern suggests growing interest in the program. And you make a hypothesis. What is your hypothesis? What you presume? Presumably due to improved facilities and high demands of STEM fields. Okay, you try to attribute a reason as well. And then now we are coming to the conclusion. Overall, the graph reflects a positive enrollment trend over the 5-year span. See how many years counted? 5 years. In the 5-year span, the graph reflects positive enrollment trend. Very precise summary. You see, such a precise summary illustrated in words is going to be a very, very fine-tuned story, a narrative that you developed. So you are supposed to do such narratives in your university life, describing graphs, charts, and all that as practice activities. And later, when you do actual research in STEM field, you have to generate graphs using data, variables in X and Y, and in many other axes. And then you have to give a proper description attributing real authentic data. So this is actually the beginning of STEM communication, right? So let's try in another example how we can try further, right? This is a group activity, I say, but since we have only 2 members today, we can do it on individual wise. Okay. So you'll be given a line graph, right? You're supposed to use 5 vocabulary items to describe trends. And the description is clear. Discuss any rise, fall, or stable phases. Write paragraph and be ready to share. Focus on clarity and logical flow. Remember, you have now read a sample paragraph graph description as well, on which you have seen how things are very creatively arranged. So keeping that in mind, let's move to the graph. And we are going to do it right now on time, making use of your vocabulary, grammar and language knowledge you learned, and your critical thinking. Here comes it. Your time counts. Starting from now, I'll be giving you 5 minutes. See what is your description.